Thank you. Thank you to the organisers for a brilliant event, and major respect to all of my sisters on the panel and for the work that you do. Thank you. And I'm probably not going to talk about that really, because I'd forgotten that that's what I was going to talk about. Like Helen, I'm actually very talked out, and I've got a kind of post-COVID cough as well, so I'll probably mess up the filming. But I am also here to utter the first use of the word lesbian, because I can't believe it hasn't actually been used. Very pleased. I don't know how many of you knew that about me, but you know, it tends not to be something I talk about very often. And what Helen referred to about the 17 years is that that's how long I've been in trouble for about this issue, right? And tonight I'm going to talk about feminism and about countering male violence, because that's what I do. And that's why I first got involved at all. I would really happily never talk about the trans issue ever again. It's not my thing. I didn't get into trouble because I dislike or have a problem with trans people at all. I've always had a massive problem with the diagnosis of transsexuality. It's rooted in 1950s misogyny, and it presupposes pink and blue brains, all of the stuff that you know. But what happened was, in 2004, is that I foolishly agreed to take over from Julie Burchill on Guardian Weekend magazine when she went on holiday to somewhere called Cocaine, I think. And obviously I couldn't sort of do a kind of hatchet-faced feminist job, so I decided to go in angry. And I was very angry at the time, because I'd seen from some international newsletter that we had in the women's movement between us that an absolutely amazing group of activists and service providers called Vancouver Rape Relief had been tied up in litigation for 10 years by a trans activist called Kimberly Nixon, who was pre-operative, who had gone to Vancouver Rape Relief demanding the right to be trained as a counsellor to deal directly with women who had been raped, victims and survivors. And the group said, no, this isn't appropriate. But if you would like to volunteer in a subgroup where it's not about direct contact with women who are experiencing trauma through their sexual assault, you'd be welcome. Waiting in the Wings was the version of Liberty, version of some human rights organisation, some men's rights organisation that called themselves a human rights organisation, because women aren't human, as well we know. And they started the litigation, and it was because Vancouver Rape Relief was so tenacious, and because they had feminist lawyers defending them pro bono, that they didn't go under, but they almost did on several occasions. So I wrote my column about it. And, you know, I went pretty far. I said, this is outrageous. And, you know, I was talking about sex stereotypes and asking the question, why is it that if men wish to transition to live as women and women wish to transition to live as men, that they are the most stereotypical? And there was the immortal line, imagine a world inhabited only by transsexuals, it would look like the set of Grease. Because it would. I was making a very serious point with a little bit of humour involved. The rest is history. But, you know, it has never left me, and I soon came to realise, because before that I had decades of feminist activism in, as I say, countering male violence. I soon came to realise, and it was an invaluable lesson, but it was also a deeply shocking and disturbing one, which is that there is no redemption. The whole point is that they wish to destroy us, because the trans activists are just misogynists, and this is a men's rights movement. And I make that distinction. When I say trans activists, that means I don't mean transgender people, although of course some cross over, but trans activism is a men's rights movement, and it's deeply woman-hating. So I realised there was no redemption. And in fact, you know, even if I set fire to myself, ran down the street screaming, I'm a transphobe, I deserve to die screaming in pain, There would, after my death, be a lawsuit which my poor partner would have to deal with, which would be that I had caused the death by lung cancer of a trans woman who was passing by and breathed in the smoke. So my entire estate, as well as body of work, would be further discredited. So that's that. And now I want to talk just about the work we do and why so many of us feminists that counter rape, sexual assault, femicide, forced marriage, FGM, etc., had to pay attention to this movement. There are, and I have to make this acknowledgement, there are some women, and they have every right to do this, who kick off big style about trans this and trans that, who aren't feminists, who aren't on the left, who don't come at this from a kind of human rights perspective, who don't do an awful lot of good for feminism, but as I say, have their own reasons. And I think it's important to locate our critique of trans activism from a feminist lens, through a feminist lens. And I'm sorry, my post-COVID cough means I've got to get some water, so I've got some in here.
There's someone here.
Ignored you. Fabulous. Okay, so men really do get very upset. Yes, not all men. When we demand single-sex spaces and services, we know this. And that's the threat to us right now. It's not just a threat, it's actually happening, isn't it?
Is there a bloke in the audience?
And also, I've got an Elsa pickle jar. Thank you for defying stereotypes. Yes. Anyway, so it's a threat. Women-only spaces are a threat. And I don't think we should only talk about rape crisis centres, domestic violence refuges, prisons, sports. They're all crucial, all of them. But I actually also want to talk about women just getting together. Did I mention I'm a lesbian? For example, when I was young and I was out as a lesbian without any context, experiencing the usual self-hatred, self-doubt. This was in the 70s. I was called a freak. I was told I wasn't safe around other people's children. I was told I wasn't a real woman. I was asked if really I was a man. All of those things. And it was when I met feminists and feminism that it made sense that I saw it as, in fact, as a political issue, that compulsory heterosexuality was necessary in order to control women. And those of us that stepped out of that were doubly punished. It's like sexism on steroids or something. And so being able to be in a group with women, only women, talking about our girlhoods and how we had come to realise that boys were never going to be for us, the drama and the horror of your first crush, the anti-lesbianism, the misogyny that goes with that, was absolutely crucial. So by the end of 1980, and I was 19 years old coming up, and I was in Leeds with a load of feminists. I'd left home, I'd done all that thing, and very proud of being a lesbian, really having a great time as a feminist. It was in during the time where Peter Sutcliffe had been killing women, and the police had shown that they didn't care about certain women, and the news coverage of it was definitely reflective of that. We were in a pit of misogyny that had never been so stark. And we had some women who were very, very angry, who were setting fire to sex shops and things like that. And some of them even drove cars into sex cinemas. There was nobody in at the time. No puppies were harmed in the execution of this direct action. But there were some very robust pieces of protest from women, and they were called angry women, and they left their notices. Angry women did this. Right? So the police, West Yorkshire Police, your very finest, decided that they would do major investigations into who these feminists could be. And in fact, I remember living in Beeston in Leeds with my girlfriend. She's black, and we were constantly attacked. They had lots of things to choose from as to why to put our windows in. And coming out and seeing these two men with crackly radios and really short, neat haircuts sweeping the street. All day. So we were all under surveillance, and in the end they got some women who they decided were bang to rights, and we decided that we had to defend them, and we had to raise money for lawyers and for childcare while they're in court and in prison and all the rest of it. And so we had a huge benefit upstairs in the trades hall. It was massive. It was a capacity of 500. And of course it was women only. And the police had said, in interviewing one of the suspects, where she was giving nothing away, they had said, you see, what we're... No, sorry, wrong accent. He said, what we're asking for, love. We want to know who Mr. Big is. So we called our benefit Mr. Big. Put your hands in your pockets to protect the misters doing this angry woman stuff. Anyway, the point of this story is, although it's a great memory for me, is that the bar was heaving, of course, up in the private room. So a friend and I walked down the stairs to go into the ordinary pub, which was inhabited by men. And it was kind of, almost... Women were allowed down there, but it was frowned upon. So we came to say 2 pints of Tetley's, please, with no head on mine. And I heard this bloke say to his mate, do you know what, Len? There's 500 women up there, all on their own. And I couldn't help myself. I said, but how can we be on our own if there's 500 of us? And it was just so obvious. They really do mean that. And then fast forward to about 5 years ago, I met a friend in a bar, and we were having a chat, and we were deep in conversation when the requisite, direct from castings came along. Hello, ladies. Lovely ladies. What are two beautiful ladies doing here on your own? So we're not on our own, are we? On account that there's two of us. And he eventually was thrown out because he started with the pair of fucking rug munchers. We went from beautiful ladies very quickly to lesbians, and we were slags. And then he threatened to set his sister on us. And he was thrown out. But I say this just to illustrate the threat to some men when we actually want to organise together. And I think it's the same, whether it's on an issue of need, so it's where there's no choice, where women are in prison, they're incarcerated, they're in mental health institutions, whatever it is. How dare we? How dare we have slightly less terrible facilities in prison than do men? This is an abomination. So that's what this is about. And today, I don't know if any of you had the pleasure of listening to Owen Jones on Jeremy Vine on TV today, in fact. So he was on TV talking about how terrible male violence against women is. I kid you not. He said, men have to do something about this. It should be up to men to deal with this and not for women to change their behaviour because of it. Oh. Well, I wonder how that fits with campaigning, because he's a trans activist, campaigning for rapists, male rapists, to be in women's prisons and for us to lose the right in law to have no men in women's refuges where women have escaped violent men, many of whom, as we know, end up dead. So that's interesting. And I do think, and we've said this before, and most of us in the room will have thought it, that the reason why this madness captured so many liberals and other people that should know better is because it was a really good opportunity to kick feminists who are saying, men do the raping, you stop now. It's your fault and it's your responsibility. So long as we were talking about victims and women's refuges and not talking about men raping women and the perpetrator, that was fine. They were behind that. But not when we started saying to them, you are to blame. And you, bystander, you are allowing this, you are encouraging this, and you clearly don't care. So they've taken that opportunity and they have really gone to town on it, haven't they? I mean, they really do hate us. And it's not cool for men on the left to be so openly misogynistic because they are supposed to support stand by their feminist comrades. But we also know that not to be true historically, which is why the lesbians left the Gay Liberation Front and formed a lesbian feminist movement of their own. So I've probably only got about 5 minutes left, so I suppose I should talk a little bit about what is good and what's changing. And I absolutely agree. Maya said that things are changing. I've been asked this a number of times over the years, and I've always said, no, it's getting worse, but we fight on and we will prevail. But it absolutely is. It really is, isn't it? Because the liberals are starting to say, oh my God, is that really? Is that what's happening? But that's just madness. I can't quite believe it. And you could say to them, well, we have been saying this for a long time, but, it's never too late. And also, how I've noticed it is, when I first started being deplatformed and picketed and hounded and heckled at universities, quite a few years back, that it was the usual kind of, well, we can have male anti-abortionists, we can have male neo-fascists speak, we won't picket them, we won't stop them from coming on campus, but we will stop you from coming on campus because you're the dangerous one. And clearly I was only ever going to talk about male violence, not about trans activism or transgender ideology. But when I started interviewing women for this book, I put calls out on social media and said I'd like to interview women up to the age of 30 from the age of 18. You may disagree with my views, but I really would like to talk to you. You can record our conversation. I will listen to you, and I'll only include you in the book if you give me permission. And quite a few came forward. 12 of which said to me, I'm really, really sorry. I was one of the group that no platformed you from wherever, university. I agreed that you were a fascist. I agreed you were dangerous. I agreed you were a bigot. And I went along with it. And it was safer for me because I would have been kicked out and I felt like I didn't really have any support. Same kind of story coming through. And all of them now are doing feminism, even if they're a little bit anonymous about it and they're meeting, not quite secretly, but they're meeting privately. And when I had my book launch in London, it was a big event, and that's because women are hungry for real feminism. And I signed over 100 books to women who were under the age of 25, saying to me, this is what they want to. Because of the work that we've all been doing in this movement, and because we constantly relate it back to the quest for women's liberation from patriarchy and the end of male violence. And that's what, in my view, we have to keep saying and we have to keep reminding people about. This is nothing to do with our views on trans people. This is nothing to do with us disliking, well, I certainly hope that's true, trans people. This is about the threat to our campaigns to stop men from raping and killing us. Because it really is an irritant, isn't it? They carry on doing it. So we carry on doing the feminism. And that's why we have to remind people that we have to keep our single-sex spaces. We have to have groups, friendship groups, political groups, groups of lesbians, groups of women who want to talk about how crap their husbands are, whatever. We need to keep them, and we have every right to do it. And when I think about joining the movement in 1979, and seeing the threats to men and the way that they just called us bitches and cunts and all the rest of it, and said that we were ugly lesbians and too ugly to rape, blah, blah, blah. Do you know what? It wasn't pleasant, but it was a damn sight easier than some of the bullshit that we get from the so-called progressives now. Because the liberals were on our side then. They wouldn't have it when these men's rights activists like David Thomas, who wrote books in the 90s about how women were all just complete twats and feminism was hideous. He now, by the way, is, I think it's either Diane or Davina Thomas who did the series, right? Loved women so much, he wanted to become one. So let's just carry on reminding ourselves, please, of why we are fighting to keep these and to open up more and more and more opportunities for women-only spaces, for women that want that. Thank you.